So, yeah.
Evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming back again to the pigsty tonight. Tonight, Richard shaved his beard. He's bought a new house. He's looking great. I have tried everywhere. I emailed Richard twice yesterday, twice today. I sent him a Facebook message and I sent him a Twitter message. And if any of the regulars knows Richard, he's not great with timekeeping. He's usually absolutely awful with timekeeping, which is why I tried to remind him. But hopefully he will remember. Hopefully he'll get any of the messages and he'll turn up. But at the minute, you've just got lowly me. But we do have Dr. Matt with us tonight. Dr. Matt, if anyone has read the description, is introduce yourself, man. Go on ahead. Let us know who you are.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Matt Monger. I'm Associate Professor of Near Eastern Languages and Literatures at MF Norwegian School of Theology, Religion and Society in Oslo, Norway. And it's a mouthful, I know. It's they changed the name recently and lengthened it, and it just made me really mad because the English name is already so hard to say. It's just like I just wish they would just call us the MF University and be done with it or something. But just kind of keeps growing. But
Yeah.
I've spent I guess about 20 years studying ancient languages and literature. I have worked with everything from Sumerian and Akkadian to Hebrew, Aramaic, Syriac, Arabic, Ethiopic, Greek, Latin, all that kind of stuff. And studying
all of that stuff.
All that. The languages of the ancient Near East, basically. And so I'm interested in the traditions that get passed around, the way ideas, scenes, motives, pictures, stories, texts get recycled, reused, all that kind of stuff. And I did my PhD in 2018 with a dissertation on the Dead Sea Scrolls manuscripts with text from the Book of Jubilees. So that's how you got a hold of me. I think you texted or
somebody. I think it was a few weeks ago because it was one of
Kip
the reasons.
Davis. I think probably my good friend Kip, Dr. Kip is a good Dead Sea Scrolls scholar, and I think you tagged him in something or did something, and he referred you to me because I am the person most recently who's worked with the Dead Sea Scrolls of Jubilees. So.
We were
shocked and amazed that someone wanted to talk to me about the Book of Jubilees, and even more shocked and amazed when I heard that there were aliens involved. So this is great.
Well, we haven't got to just the aliens yet. They're in and around the Garden of Eden. We're reading the Ethiopian. What is it? The Ethiopian version, the English translation of it, because I think it's been declared, the most closest. Closest to it. The reason I reached out to Kip originally was that my non-existent co-host he's really hating the Book of Jubilees. As I said to you just before we come on, there's certain phrases that would be more flowery, as I would refer them, more, to give it a wee bit more this. And these sort of phrases would align with his alien ideas, but then his main core principles, like for talk's sake, the heaven being on the earth rather than being in the sky, totally goes against what he says. Now, the reason I picked Jubilees this time over the other ones is because I knew that he'd either known of them or read them. And Jubilees, he's based all his information on Genesis, different readings of Genesis. I think his Bible is from 1400 and something. Maya's in the chat, says, "Hi, Dad."
Oh, is she? Nice. Hi, Mia.
Hi to everybody in the chat that's turned up as well. I'm getting a little excited and I forgot to say hello. My mother's there, so I'm the child. Pork Granny's me mum. We've got Sandy, we've got Dargendorp, we've got Mr. Willis. Marty's still at work, unfortunately. Jody's here, and I think Critical jumped in for a wee while and then she ran away again. It's getting late there too. But thanks everybody for I know we're a wee bit earlier than usual, but thank you very much for coming. But yeah, as I was saying, he's really having, and I can start to see the bias in him. He's just picking at the smallest of things, where in a previous reading of, say, Revelations, that definition and that approach was fine. He's quite consistent. And I'm trying to find a scripture that is, I don't want to say older than Genesis. It is referred to as a second Genesis or Genesis B, yeah.
Mm.
And I wanted to find something that was old, that was popular at the time at least, you know, and being read at the time so that it had significance, and that as you have researched over your 20 years, shit changes as we go along. And
Yep.
where he's jumped in at maybe the 15th century, that's a fuckload of time from when it started, you know.
Yeah.
So even though it was canonized then by men, you know, there's this, that, and the other. I do believe it's an Essene. Is it that right? Essene? Essene? ESS?
Essene, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was popular for them. And then we
Yep.
did a little bit of research. And then there was a subsect of them that began with M that I can't remember. And they used to also keep their scriptures in caves.
Okay.
So
Yep.
I can't remember what that small sect of Essene was or whatever. But we were going around dates. And I think that we've agreed from what we've seen that Jubilees is in and around 160 BCE from what we can put down and confirm. Would you say that's in and around right?
So that's the traditional dating for it, traditional. I mean, up until me, basically. That's what.
Racking
That's
it
what,
out of the park straight away.
so the normal dating of Jubilees is that it has to be so around 160 or later. So it can't be earlier than that. That's just because of some of the stuff that it describes. Really has to do with the Hasmonean or the Maccabean period. So we're after the time when Antiochus Epiphanes desecrates the temple and the Maccabean rebellion and stuff like that.
After the 70 years.
So we're after that, right? So we're in we're in 60s, and then the theory then for that I guess most people have subscribed to is that then it's written very quickly after that, so it belongs there. Other scholars, especially Israeli scholars, tend to date it a little bit later. So would say towards the end of the hundreds, so the 2nd century. And I don't know how we would know what exactly in that period between 160 and say 110 or something. I don't know how we would know the difference really. So I don't have a lot of cards in that game. But so my research on the Dead Sea Scrolls though kind of points to that there was literary development over a period of probably 100 years or so, where like the oldest manuscripts we have are actually slightly different than the later versions. And so we see some kind of development even within the Book of Jubilees itself, probably through the hundreds and into right up until about the turn of the era. And then after that, it's getting more fully what we know from the Ethiopic version.
Reading the research that we came across, as I say, we started with Wikipedia and then worked our way down, you know, and I've done a wee bit more than what Richard's done.
Yep.
But there was, if I'm correct in what we read, it was only 4 more books that were more popular being found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, as in there was a lot of copies of the Book of Jubilees. Is that research that you're working on based from all the different versions all found at that stage, or is there other? I don't think there's anything older than the Dead Sea Scrolls, is there?
Nope. No, there's nothing older than the Dead Sea Scrolls, and so that, I mean, that it's a really good question, and I really appreciate the question, because this is one of the things I'm working on now. I spent a lot of time on a few manuscripts right at in my PhD, and was just kind of, my goal was to compare those with the Ethiopic text and with the other bits from Latin and Greek from citations and stuff that we find, and be able to show that the text isn't the same. Like we have changes that happen, and so that was kind of the goal then. And now I've turned more towards the question you're asking, because we do see that there's what, 14, 15, maybe 17 or 18, depends on how you count and what you consider a manuscript of Jubilees. But there's maybe up towards 18 manuscripts that do have the Book of Jubilees in it at Qumran, or among the Dead Sea Scrolls, which makes it, like you said, probably about like the third or fourth most popular book. So definitely Psalms and Deuteronomy and Genesis are up there, maybe, and also Exodus might be ahead of it. So we might be fifth or something. But
well, if
anyway.
I can ask a question, because I feel that Richard
Yep.
not being here would ask this question, right? Because
Okay.
this is one of the things that we were discussing. Is what I'm trying to put forth is the popularity of the book,
Right.
you know, and the fact that what he says, right, well, this is canon and this is what's been canon for thousands of years and all the rest of it. This
Yep.
is more popular than that. And what I'm trying to put forth as an argument is this is maybe not as popular, but definitely up there. And from what I've seen, when you found the Book of Jubilees, you would usually find Genesis along with it. They usually come as a package.
Yeah. So that, I mean, so two points to that. First of all, I think one of the things that we have a massive problem with in basically everything that's communicated, both, I mean, outside of our little guild of Dead Sea Scrolls scholars, everything that's communicated out is somewhat or has been somewhat unfaithful to the actual evidence, because we don't have almost any complete books or texts. We have bits, we have fragments, and they look like, you know, like cornflakes in most cases. It's just little bits, and we sometimes have a bit larger, but they're not massive. Like we have this Isaiah scroll that's complete, and then beyond that we don't have a lot. And so what we have are smaller things that aren't necessarily complete copies. And what the research I'm doing right now on the Dead Sea Scrolls is trying to calculate what portions of texts actually were in the manuscripts we have. Because I don't think that every time we have the Book of Genesis, it was the entire Book of Genesis. I think we have bits and pieces that are copied, sometimes more often the creation story or the flood story or the Jacob story or the Joseph story were copied.
Yeah.
And not the entire thing. And so then we see that certain narratives were popular and not necessarily the entire things, right? And so some of the stuff in Genesis doesn't get as copied as much as other things in Genesis. And so then, like, this kind of goes to the thing about the canon that you brought up, because it's we don't believe that there was a canon at that point. Like nobody within biblical studies or you know, working in ancient Judaism anymore thinks that there was a biblical canon in the 1st, 2nd century BC.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing to be canonized, but there was something that was important. And Genesis seems to have been very important as a base for what you told. But at the same time, Genesis didn't answer all the questions that needed to be answered, and it didn't fit into the world that people in the 2nd and 1st centuries BC were living in.
Yes.
And so Jubilees is composed to bridge that gap by fixing and retelling, recomposing, and then doing this thing that is probably the most important thing, is fixing the calendar. So Jubilees changes the calendar into the solar calendar from the lunar calendar that's in the Bible.
I feel Richard would go woo at this minute, because that's the stars and solar system. So woo for Richard.
Right. So and when he gets here, I can woo him as well. But the I mean the thing that's going on there when we talk about Jubilees compared to the other stuff, or along with the other stuff, is exactly what you're saying, that Jubilees was hugely popular. And it wasn't just that it was hugely popular, but the calendar that's used in Jubilees is the calendar that's found in dozens of manuscripts at Qumran as well. And so the way the Essenes, or at least the Qumran group of Essenes, were living, they were following the calendar that is in Jubilees, not the one that's found in Genesis. And of course they overlap and they're structured together, but to make sense of the calendar that you have at Qumran, you have to read Jubilees. And that's how scholars actually figured it out, was they had all these manuscripts with these dates and these things, and they didn't know what it meant. And then somebody said, oh wait, that looks like the calendar from Jubilees. And then they were able to figure it out. So it was obviously not only popular, but it was also influential.
So the analogy that I used to him from the research, I think it was about an episode or maybe 2 episodes ago, was to try and put forth the idea that you've got a big, and we're making everything very simple, if I can. I have a weird style of communication, but imagine the country's a perfect square. It's cut up into 4 parts, and I'm trying to be a little alien for him. I'm trying to give this idea. I'm bringing in the idea that Richard's aliens come down and tell the story. What I was putting forth, that there's a big square, and this square was told the story, but it then broke off. These 3 people were on one side of a mountain, or for whatever reason they could interchange with, and their stories all melded. And you've got this Book of Jubilees over here, Book of Enoch, that sort of thing. And then they all come together again because they learn to climb over mountains. That would be wrong. So you're saying Jubilees is specifically made to correct the differences between when Genesis was written to when it became more mainstream.
Yes, I would. So I mean, I guess until you asked me that question, whether aliens might have told it, I was completely convinced that Jubilees is just a rewriting of Genesis. I have to rethink it because I don't really have the arguments in place about why aliens can't be involved.
We'll get you back again when Richard is definitely sure at the time. This is your break-in episode.
Yeah, that's but I think so there are a lot of. I mean, there's overwhelming evidence that Jubilees, that the author of Jubilees or the composers or whatever we want to call them, had the Book of Genesis in front of them when they were writing. Like, just that there are so many verbatim parallels with the Book of Genesis. The structure is taken from Genesis. The language is taken from Genesis. And then you also see that even what it chooses to omit is done so to fix problems in Genesis for a reader in a later time. And so I think you've talked about the creation story, right? In Jubilees, and that's one of my favorite texts. This is what I spent like half of my dissertation writing about, and I think this is a perfect illustration of why it has to be a rewriting of Genesis, because there is no other 7-day creation story, right? And the way that Jubilees starts is, I mean, we have this prologue, that whole first chapter that does the weird thing.
Could you explain the reasons for that? Is that a summary, or is that a prologue to each chapter always there? We weren't sure if it was a summary part of our breakdown or whatever. What is the reason for that?
So the basic, so my reading of Jubilees is that what we have is a justification of the fact that Jubilees exists. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then comes the beginning. And so what we start with is this title that says this is the book of the divisions of the law and the times and the blah blah blah, and it goes on to say that God gave to Moses on the mountain when he went up to get the tablets of the law and the testimony. Mm-hmm. And that is a direct citation of Exodus 24:12. So it's taken directly from Exodus, and it's a place where after Moses has been on the mountain, right? So Moses goes up on the mountain, he gets the 10 commandments, yeah, and then he goes back down, and then he goes back up, and he might have gone down and back up another time. He goes up and down about 17 times, I think. So it's just it's a wacky story. But on one of those occasions, he goes up and he's given, then it says that he's given the tablets of the law and the testimony. And what Jubilees does is says, well, you know the tablets of the law, which would be the Torah, but this is then the other stuff that he was given, right? So this is the other things that Moses was given that other time he went up the mountain, and so this is the logic of Jubilees here, is trying to say the reason we have knowledge that you didn't know is that an angel was on the mountain. Mm-hmm. And told this to Moses when he went up another time, not just the time of the first giving of the Torah.
So if you're taking into consideration, where would you place the date? Because I noticed a few times when we talked about it, you were like, that's what most people until they met me. So where you, if you could put a 50-year time gap on it, where would you place Jubilees?
So I would say that I don't have a problem with the 160 date for the beginning of the composition of Jubilees, but I would say that it continues to be edited up until about the time of Christ.
Right, so a good 200 years approximately.
Yes, 150 years of development. I think that we can't know within that span exactly when things are done, but my reading of it is that there are things happening that are put into the text that happen. I think during the time when it probably happens at Qumran. Actually, it's part of the Dead Sea Scrolls editing of these texts. I think I can't prove that. But the language and the things. So one of the things that happens is that in Jubilees, the devil, his name is Mastema. So he's not Satan, but his name is Mastema. And when you look at the oldest manuscripts, we see Mastemas there. But then in the later Ethiopic version, we have the addition of another devil whose name is Belial, and he appears then in just a couple of places, and these are places that are missing in the oldest manuscripts. And so that for me says that like he shows up later, and he happens to be the preferred devil figure at Qumran in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so I think that this guy shows up because somebody's writing text a little later and says, oh, we need a little Belial action in here. And so I mean, it's a technical argument, but it's part of the kind of thing that I see it as a developing text because people are engaging with their time and the text of Genesis and trying to bring things up to date.
Right. So your team, Richard, definitely confirmed.
So Team Richard, in the sense that I do think that this stands in a long line of reinterpreting earlier texts.
Yeah.
So that's my, I mean, and like, you know, shameless plug, but my YouTube channel, it's the label is the Bible was written backwards.
He loved that. He absolutely loved that.
That is literally my perspective on all of this, is that everything is looking backwards. And so like a super cool example it comes out of this creation story in Jubilees chapter 2, which you guys have already talked about, so everybody will be experts here. And so you probably would have hung up on the idea that in the beginning, like in the Genesis story, it says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and then the
in and out and in and out and in and out of the Garden of Eden.
And you would have seen that on the first day in Jubilees, God creates the heavens and the earth and the light and the dark and the day and the night and the spirits of all of the angels that serve him. And then it says like the angels of the sanctification, the angels of this and the that, and the spirits of the winds and the blah, 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 right? And I would imagine that Richard would have thought that was a very interesting detail, that all these angels and spirits are created.
He was, I don't want to say dismissive because that's a personal feeling, but I feel that he sort of blad over it. That may be at the point where he was getting annoyed and then asked, do we need to read all this sort of stuff, and can we not just skip to the aliens? And we did a vote and people voted, which I wanted to as well, which was to read every word to see the differences. But I was fighting the corner as in it was an alternative Genesis, not a replacement Genesis.
Right.
So I'm wrong, and now your team.
No. So you're definitely right. So this is not a replacement Genesis, and this is the very like there are very few things that are consensus in this kind of humanities research, you know. But I think one of the things that is pretty much agreed on by most people that work with the Book of Jubilees is that Jubilees doesn't function well unless you have Genesis. So it's not a replacement for Genesis, but it brings it up to date and comments on it and answers questions that you would have been asking if you're a good practicing Jew in the 2nd and 1st centuries BC and you read your Bible well. You're going to be going, wait, what about this?
What you're telling me is this is the very first downloadable upgrade package. You know, they've got their game. It needs to be updated. It needs to have new levels and brought into level where you are now.
Yeah.
You're just
well,
getting
I would say it's not the first, because I believe Genesis does the same thing with Babylonian mythology.
Oh yeah,
But,
yeah.
I mean, but it's within. I mean, it's just such a clear example because of how close it is, right? I mean, because it's a shameless copy and update. It's not a tricky one, right? And so one of the things then with that, I mean, I think for me proves that it's a biblical update of things, is that you have to ask the question, why on earth does Jubilees want the angels created? Right? I mean, what? Because why are they thrown in there on the first day? What's going on? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you go through systematically and look at what Jubilees does, is that Jubilees basically says that anything that is mentioned in the text of Genesis as being, Jubilees wants it created. And so when it says in Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and the Spirit of God was over the deep. That Jubilee says God created the heavens and the earth and the void and the deep and all the spirits. And so it's saying that all those little details that are in the Genesis story, those were things that God created too. And so it's trying to fix this so you wouldn't think that there were things in existence besides God at the beginning. And so it's a theological concern to say that every single thing there was no deep or spirit that God didn't create that were moving around. These things were created by God.
Now, if I can ask, right, as you say, we think that you think it came around in and around maybe 150, 160, worked its way up for that 200 years nearly, up until the time of Christ and stuff. And there was obviously edits between it. Now, one person didn't do that, because it's too long of a lifespan. We're talking, what of a lifespan around that stage? 35, 45, somewhere in around there?
Yeah, something like that.
That.
You could there's evidence of people living longer than that. But
I'm sure that people did live longer, but there's the average.
Generally, we're talking a generation is at the most 40 years, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we've got multiple generations of people changing this, who would define themselves as Jewish people.
Yes.
Now, from what we've seen and what I mentioned earlier, and it used to be known as the Essene Library, that we cave.
That's
that
right.
was a particular sect of what we would refer to as Judaism. Was that a big sect? Was it a minority? How big was that before the time of Christ? And did that particular group in any way influence Jesus? Do you think that, because there wasn't just Jews and it wasn't canonized. Right. There's Jews here, they're all different types. Right. We just demonetized ourselves because we're Nazis now.
Yeah. So so it's really hard to say, and this is one of those things that the answer would have been completely different 50 years ago than it is today, because up until the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, everybody was said pretty much anything outside mainline rabbinic Judaism or the things that Josephus mentions, that he mentions Essenes, but they seem to be kind of a small little group or whatever. And then you've got the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and that's like they're mentioned.
And that other group with them that I can't find the name of at all right now.
We would have just figured that that these groups of people were very marginalized, that they weren't a big deal. But having found all this literature in the Dead Sea Scrolls, then you start to have to think in terms of you have to think in terms of monetary value of manuscripts and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it takes a lot of goats or sheep or calves or whatever to make a manuscript. And so if you find upwards of 1,000 different manuscripts, and many of them are connected to these sects. I mean, probably the Essenes or whatever, this group of people that have a different idea, different theology, different line of thinking than what you see in mainstream Judaism. Then you have to think that they must have had enough support to be able to produce manuscripts on a large scale.
And
so
repeatedly.
Right. And so it's not a little marginalized, poor society that has nothing. They obviously have means, and they have enough people that they are able to produce things of value over an extended period of time. And we know of other groups of Essenes, other places in the land, in Israel, or even whatever we call it, Judea, Palestine, whatever. And
the really warm place.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is that we do know that it is that this group was at least influential enough to be able to produce their own literature and to influence even I would say modern things that move into modern Judaism and modern texts. So we see things from this kind of literature show up other places. So we have in the one of the best examples is a document that was found in the Cairo. I don't know if you know about the Cairo Geniza. It's in Cairo there was a Jewish synagogue where in the 1800s they found tons and tons of old Hebrew manuscripts that had been kind of buried there. And in Judaism, this is a normal practice that when a manuscript is no longer usable, you bury it. So you kind of treat it like a person, like a holy thing, and you put it in a room that's called a geniza, which is like a burial room for manuscripts. And there they found this text that they called it then the Zadokite document, which was, I mean, it was a thing. But in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found this other copies of that same thing, right? And so that showed that there are connections, also a kind of.
And that's not, I don't want to say that it's close in our term, and it's not absolutely massive between Egypt and them, because obviously Egypt was a controlled country at that stage, but it's still a big enough distance. It's not something you just jump on your horse and deliver. It has to gradually work its way across.
Yep. Exactly. And then Jubilees is the other thing that really shows that Qumran was part of something bigger, because of the fact that with Jubilees, it disappears as a book from Christianity and Judaism. It shows up in the Greek historians. Greek Christian historians use some citations of it, and they tend to use just a very small set of citations. But other than that, it's in Ethiopia, and the question has always been what really happened there. But there is some connection that it moves its way from Israel to Egypt, and from Egypt on its way to Ethiopia. And that is, for me, that just shows that the Essenes and the group of people at the Dead Sea, whatever we want to call them, that they were a part of something bigger, and that was interconnecting with the other things. And it wasn't just that they were, an isolated group.
I have a crazy thought, and then I have two questions. Crazy thought, quite a big group, other group, say they're 50-50, and then the other group goes 60-40, so they try to kick the Essenes out. They then leave and go to Ethiopia and take with them all their stuff. That's a crazy thought. Two questions.
We call them aliens that make that journey?
No, I've lost Richard now at the start. He's lost. I'm just interested because I love this sort of shit. First question. I need to keep my trail of thought or I'll lose it. First question. Between the very first and between the oldest copy and the youngest copy of Jubilees that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, considering they are the oldest that we have, what is the time difference? And then what is the time difference relative to the whole entire Dead Sea Scrolls between the first and last?
That's a really good question, and really up to date. So I mean, I think like you're almost kind of omniscient here. I'm wondering if you're one of these head aliens that knows stuff or something.
I'm
Uh,
just this sort of stuff really excites. Well,
no,
I don't want to use
it's a
excites
really
me, but
really good question
yeah.
on both counts because so just this past year, a colleague in the Netherlands did new carbon datings of some of the oldest Dead Sea Scrolls. And one of the ones that he did was the oldest Jubilees manuscript, which is also the main focus of my PhD. And the oldest manuscript we have is a bit of the creation story of Jubilees.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at this oldest manuscript, it has a type of writing. So paleographically, we would date it to sometime probably in the second century. It's an old thing. It's not. It's one of the older Qumran scrolls, one of the oldest Dead Sea Scrolls. And what happens is that when he carbon dates this, the results that they get, they use some kind of AI algorithm and I don't know all. I haven't seen the published
Tech
version.
shit. They did tech shit.
Yeah, he hasn't published the official results yet, but we heard a talk at a conference in the fall, and he says that basically this manuscript is supposed to come from the first half of the second century BCE. So like that's when Jubilees was written. Like it, I mean, we have the creation story. That's all it is that's that old. But the Jubilees creation story, we have a bit that could be from the same time as the.
So you may have a first or second edition that they went, oh shit, this could be important, and put in the cave.
Yeah, and I mean, so I feel that it could have been composed prior to the composition of the rest of the Book of Jubilees, even. And that's one of those things that you could debate. Were some of the stories composed previously?
I'm going to get real particular now on that particular fragment. It's probably got some silly name, PH45 or something like
4Q 216.
So there you go. Right, 4Q. What is it?
216.
216. Okay, 216. Right. Parchment 216 is this size. Yeah, it's this size.
No, it's tiny. It's tiny.
Yeah, I know. I'm being sarcastic. It's like. It's about what? By that size?
No. So, can I share my screen?
Yes. Yes, you can. It'll be really tight.
I can send you a link, and you can.
No. Share the screen. Share the screen. I'll just swap it with me.
There we go. So.
And if I swap me,
there we go.
You,
yep,
that should work.
It. Yeah.
There we go.
So this is it. This is the oldest piece.
Did nobody ever tell you to put a bit lighter beside things so we can get relative size?
So yeah, well, I can give you. I can give it. Yeah, there we go. That's 6 centimeters.
Oh, so that's a decent enough size. Like that's
Yeah.
It's not super tiny. And can you tell that it's specifically Jubilees from the wordage that's used? Even in that small fragment, there's a few words or phrases that's only Jubilees. Or is it the style of writing?
No, there's no question. So this is the end of the creation story in Jubilees. And there's absolutely no question about whether or not it's Jubilees. There's no question that it is the creation story as we find it in Jubilees. But my feeling is that this is an earlier version of it than what we have in the complete Book of Jubilees later. So it represents a stage before it's finalized.
Oh,
right. And so this is from then. I mean, I didn't date it this early when I did my work on it, but if they're really saying it's from the second century, beginning of the second century, that's fine. I'll take that as well. But when I'll even zoom in here so you can see this because it's such a beautiful thing. It is
actually, if I haven't looked this close at a lot of pieces of the Dead Sea Scroll. but
Yeah.
it looks to be, as considering the size of it, very good condition.
Yeah. And so, I mean, so this is, honestly, this right here is a word that I changed. This is something that, like, when you're into manuscripts and Dead Sea Scrolls, then actually changing a word is one of the biggest things you can accomplish. So
So you
there,
did get this tattooed on your body somewhere.
yeah, I should have this tattooed somewhere, but I mean, it's very well planned. So if you can see here, there's dots, just to the upper right of some of the letters.
Yeah.
And those are guide dots that show the scribe where to start writing, the
He's using
line.
A4 lined pages.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they are. I mean, So it's obviously been produced well. I mean, you see here he's missed the mark a little bit on that one, and then that gets a bit of a gap there.
Well, they did
But
wrote. Now this is a scroll.
yes, so this would have been a scroll,
So if you
and
imagine that he has a meter stick or whatever that he's using, and that's
yeah,
the end of the stick where he has to then move it down, you're going to
right.
get a wee bump.
Right. And I also think this is the end of the scroll. So I believe that this was basically just the creation story. And that this was because what I've done is made some measurements, and when you look at the other bits, I've kind of reconstructed it together and shown the way it would have been rolled up, and
That's what I was going to ask. This particular section that he has dated, that's why we're spending time and focusing on it. But
yeah.
these were all found in clay jars. Am I correct? Or some sort of a jar, or were they all just lying around? Or
So most of the stuff, now I've stopped sharing there, so you can figure out
okay.
what you want to do. The So most of the scrolls were not found in clay jars. They were just laying around. Well, let's say we assume that they were laying around. I actually don't know in the vast majority of cases.
it was a goat herder.
Because
Goat
they
herder
were
wrote them, and a goat herder found them.
well, but that's what it is. I mean, the traditional story is that a goat goes into a cave, and the guy's trying to get him out, throws a stone to get him out, and here's a clay jar break, and that's the story. But I mean, we don't really believe that now as a true story. But somebody did discover that there were things in these caves, but the vast majority of them came to scholars in the hands of the Bedouin who brought them, and sold them to make money. And so there were some excavations done where they found some things.
That's what I was going to say. People did go back though. He remembered the location, and was any found after he left?
Well, so yeah, there were, and we have unfortunately horribly bad records of what was actually found at these excavations, but there were some fragments found, and there are some pictures taken of the stuff that was found. And we know that some of the bits that were found later in the excavations match with some of the other manuscripts we have, so that we can say that, okay, they did come out of that cave or whatever.
Right. So that was where I was aiming for. This entire scroll, you don't know if it was in a cave. Whenever it became on record, it was just known as a chunk, and you believe that you have other chunks of the same scroll, and that's how you can determine part of the reason why you can determine that it's an end of a scroll.
Right. Yeah, and we have other bits from that one that do have the exact same handwriting, the same color skin, the same number of lines.
Lamb skin, goat skin. What type of skin was it again?
The vast majority are goat skin. I'm not 100% sure of what this animal was. They wouldn't let me lick it to find out.
It's a bit old.
There's rumors that the first scholars would lick the fragments to kind of get a feel from where they came from.
Oh, they really didn't care about contaminating scenes at all.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Okay,
pretty
right. You've just made right. Okay, I went to America over Christmas, and we went to a cave system, and we went down underground, and it wasn't a massive crew, but we deliberately stayed at the end, and I did climb underneath the wee thing to take pictures and stuff. And while I was there, I had my tongue out and about 1 millimeter from a stagnite. I was very tempted to let him. Yeah. I'm a child too. Okay.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
But
The yeah,
back to
so
the. Did we get a date for the most? Now we've got a date for the oldest one now, and we've been chatting about that. Have we got a date for the newest one so we can discern how long they were using this cave, to get a time frame of that?
Yeah, so the Dead Sea Scrolls basically are being copied and made up until right around the year 70, or maybe 67 after Christ. So it's
So 70,
yeah,
sorry, 70 after Christ.
70 AD. Yep, that was the easiest way. 70 CE, AD, whatever you want to call it.
I'm old school. AD's quicker on the brain.
Yeah. So in what 67 AD, the Romans are going through the Jordan Valley and destroying sites, and 70 AD is when the temple falls in Jerusalem. And so in that time is when the Qumran community is destroyed.
So
that's
approximately 200 years.
Yeah, so approximately 200 years is what we've got as a time span. And
if we take a generation,
majority of the Dead Sea Scrolls are copied within that time frame. We have some like this one manuscript of Jubilees that are pre Dead Sea Scrolls, but that they end up being buried among the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then you have a whole bunch of stuff that is copied in the 1st century BC up until 70 or whatever, mid 1st century AD. So that is the time frame that most of the stuff is produced.
Based on our previous conversation of taking an average lifespan of 40, we'll maybe add 10 years because these people are, obviously well funded. They've got, what are you going to do? You're not killing the goat just for his skin. You're going to eat the goat, so they're going to live a wee bit longer. We'll give them 50. That's 4 generations of people that dedicated their lives and all of this to doing this. To be a scholar, to be a scribe in the time isn't like your mum and dad teaching you school writing, because nobody knew it. It's an actual formal thing that takes time. So there's a lot of effort went into it, and considering again back to the Jubilees how many copies of that there was, that in particular was very, very important.
Yeah, definitely. And that's that's one of those things that I think is really good to highlight, that there is really it's just so different to own a copy of a scroll than to own a book today. Like to own a book today is something. I mean, you can pick up a Penguin paperback down at the shop for $1, or I mean, maybe inflation makes it a couple of dollars now, but it's not something that you spend a year's wage to have produced.
And it's not even the wage. It's to produce a book these days on mass production. You could probably say would take an hour, and that's being nice. It's probably less than that. But to write a book and to put the effort in, you're the physical copying machine. It's not like look up, look down. You'll get faster at it, but it takes ages to copy a goddamn freaking scroll.
Yeah, it does.
And education.
It takes education,
money,
and
food.
It takes money, and it also takes, I would say, the protection of a community. I mean, you have to be in a pretty special place to be able to be involved in copying scrolls like that.
Imagine me and you back in the day. I'm the hermit that has to go and grow his own wild cabbage and fish, and you're the scribe in the temple, getting food delivered to you for free.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that it just has to be. I mean, you have to imagine, if there are professional scribes, that then there are other people doing other things that support them.
Do you know anything about the conditions of life, particularly back in them days, as we're just talking about that? Like, was there, in and around the particular area of where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, was it a rather arid land? Was there rivers nearby? Was it fertile? Well, in this time and day, was it possible even to have a community here, or would it have automatically been harder?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the place where you would want to start a community. I mean, it's in the I mean, they call this in the official publication series, they call it the texts of the Judean desert, and that's because this is the desert, it's the wilderness,
And it
it
was
is not.
then.
Yeah, and that was then as well. Yeah, and it's not the most hospitable place, but they did have a community. I mean, they lived. We have buildings there, just adjacent to the caves
Mm.
where these people lived, and so there's different theories about the connection between the community and the caves themselves. We don't know exactly what was the connection. I think it's shocking that anyone would say there's no connection at all, given the fact that when we go, I mean, if you go there to visit, I don't know if you've ever been, like, but if you ever go,
Unfortunately.
they have a nice little museum. You can walk around and see the ruins of the community where they lived. They've done excavations, so they know basically what was done in a number of the different rooms. They have like found ink pots and stuff in one of the rooms, and they know that one, it was a ritual bath, and they have the kitchens or whatever. So like, you understand that they were doing stuff. And then, like, just a few hundred meters down the path is the caves, and so it's not a stretch, right? So
Yeah.
they were definitely connected somehow, I think. But
Uh, back
we
in
ass-
then.
so we assume that they then also had gardens or had access to something. I mean, like whether or not they had animals or stuff, they would have been producing some sort of food for consumption there. But also, it's not far from Jerusalem and the Judean highlands, where you can get more food, I guess, where you can go and do things differently.
Well, that's the question I was going to ask. There's the whole story of Jesus and his 40 days of fasting and things like that. And there's different sects and different religions. And, you don't necessarily have to be a minority to go into the wilderness and starve yourself. You could be a majority, but that's part of your religion, is to go and live in this sort of thing. So that's,
Right.
where I was aiming the question is, do you think it was more of a religious reason that they would go out there, or do you think it was, I don't want to use the word persecution, I feel it's too strong, but it's like, we can't hang out in the town centre because we get sticks and stones thrown at us, it's like being in Northern Ireland and a Protestant in the 70s, you don't go down that street, you stay out there. Or do you
Yeah.
feel it was a choice as a religious thing to go out that way?
So I do think it was a choice as a religious thing. I think that um, it would be hard to imagine that a community would want to would want to do that kind of thing, unless there was some value in being away from the larger parts of society.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there is some pretty good evidence that these people even maybe were participating in the priesthood in Jerusalem. So they weren't completely disconnected from what was
Yeah.
going on. They're very connected to it, but they've chosen to live in a different way. And I just think that it's, I don't like to radicalize this kind of thing, because I think we just don't know enough. Because they're also along the Dead Sea. You also have like nice, Roman houses, and there's fortresses, and there's things. So it's like, I mean, it's not a shocking thing that somebody would go there. And by land, or I mean by air, I guess, as the bird flies, it's I don't know, 20-25 kilometers. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
it's not some kind of massive 6-day journey to get to the Dead Sea. It's just kind of, you roll down out of Jerusalem and keep rolling until you get to the Dead Sea, and so I think that there is, I think distance is one of the reasons why we can see some variation and some kind of different texts and things like that. But at the same time, I think we need to just be careful that we don't do too much crazy radicalizing of them, just
Yeah,
because
well,
they.
as a person, and we were talking about, because for anyone who's an American audience probably hasn't seen in the news, but it was, as Dr. Matt pointed out on the Norwegian news, Northern Ireland's on fire again. Every fucking Easter, every goddamn Easter, they have to fucking wreck the place. If anyone hasn't seen my video from a few years ago in April and what was going on, should be happening again. Only literally on the streets, right up against the police with the balaclavas on. It's 10 times worse. Personally, I feel that it's foundationally based on territory over gangs, regardless of where the foundation of the gang started from. But in that mindset, I'm thinking of what you're talking about, Dr. Matt, as just a big Belfast. You have a different group here of people who feel comfortable and can think their area, still not too far from the main centre. You can have that. You can have areas and chunks of people still close to each other with still completely radical different ideas.
Yeah. And also, I mean, it's a really good analogy actually too, because you have, I think in first century BC and AD Palestine, you have different groups, religious groups, or whatever we want to call it, sects or whatever. I don't care. It does. I have nothing invested in the words we use. But then we also have
good fucking man.
Yeah, we also have the Roman powers that be that do control the area, and this is something that adds a dimension to it that it actually, I guess, is kind of similar to the Ireland situation, is because you have the Romans that do control it, and so if a group is being faithful to the Romans and is showing that they're accepting Greco-Roman culture, they're doing what the Romans want, they are going to have certain benefits in society. As compared to those who don't play ball with the Romans or who are militant.
Conspirators. That's what we call them.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think when you look at the dynamics, you have to think, okay, there were different religious groups that interpreted their texts in different ways and thought that they had the right way of reading the Torah or the Hebrew Bible, whatever. But also they had their idea of what was the best way to interact with the Romans or with the Greco-Roman culture. And those two things don't always line up in the way you would expect them, right? And so I think that makes for a situation where some people might want to pull away from civilization, but more to avoid the Greco-Roman situation than to avoid the religious conflicts that might have been.
See, but that's another thing that was just coming to my mind as well, is if you have to take into consideration there's an occupation going on, generally the occupating, that's not even a word. Occupier, right, would demand a tax or a fee if you hit a certain size. They're not going to, they're going to tax a big group more, right? They've got good capitalism, unlike America at the moment. Rich get off for free. But that just adds another emphasis to the size that the group must be. Because if they're having to give up, say, 10% as an arbitrary number once a year of their harvest or their meat or their goats to the occupier, then that just adds another size of how much of a size of a group that they were.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and those are things, I mean, we know that there were taxes in first century Palestine. I mean, that's also part of the... Or I guess you've read stories about Jesus even doing the taxes and all that kind of stuff. My favorite one is the one where Jesus or Peter says to Jesus, "Wait, are we supposed to pay taxes?" And Jesus says, "Well, go catch a fish and you'll find some money in it." And like that's just like his solution. Just I'll do a miracle and catch a fish. You pay for us both. But there's taxes going on, and the Romans. It ended up destroying everything because the Jews were revolting. And that's one of the things you have to remember is that by the year 70, then basically the Romans had taken control to the extent that they destroyed basically everything.
So just if I can interject, just to clarify in my mind, from what I'm reading and all the rest of, you've got really, really going back. I'm going to be very bland and very blunt to keep it short. So you've got the Jews, they're general slaves to the Babylonians and stuff like that. They then break free, find their own area, which is controlled by Egypt at the time. And then over that period, it went from that to the Romans then coming in. Or did they get independence? Or, just to clarify the history.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So, before the Babylonian thing, there was a Judean and Israelites kingdom or something, and then they're conquered by first the Assyrians,
not far away.
then the
We
Babylonians,
don't care. Too long ago.
They come back from the after the Babylonian period, let's say.
Yeah.
Then what? I mean, the Persians are in control then, and the Persian Empire is the empire that introduced ruling through governance or through governors rather than ruling through occupation. And that's kind of the basic change that happens, is that the Babylonians and the Assyrians, they would occupy and destroy and deport and mix and tried to make a heterogeneous situation that made
again,
everyone
like Northern Ireland. I'm a Protestant descendant from Scotland because my ancestors were sent over here to breed the Catholic side.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that those kind of deportations, moving of peoples and the intermingling so that they would lose their identities or whatever. And then the Assyrians, and then after them, the Babylonians would have control. And that was their method. But the Persians came and said, no, what we want to do is just let them do their things and have their gods and have their cultures and just pay taxes to us. And
I think
so
the Mongols did that as well. Did the Mongols not do that?
And they did, and then the Greeks took over Alexander the Great, the Macedonians, and then the Greeks took over the same thing. Like they used the Persian roads. The Persians were the ones who established all the routes. The Persians then had basically everything, almost to Greece. Basically, the famous battles and everything. But they have Egypt. They have all the way up to Persia and eastward. And Alexander the Great comes and conquers the entire Persian Empire. He gets all the way to the Hindu Kush and then all the way down into Egypt. And that's in the 300s. And then what happens is that the Israel-Palestine then becomes a province of this, this Greek.
It's not too far, it's sort of in the middle, It's
in the middle, and it always is. And this is, I think, the reason why anything has existed there at all. I mean, this is historically, as historians, we say things. We have to find reasons, and you have to find reasons. It's not the same reason.
It's a guessing game, but yes, we have to make infers and make good guesses.
Right, and so one of the things that is a reason I think that Israel exists in the way it does through most of antiquity is just the fact that it's in the vacuum between the powers in the north and the powers in the south. And the powers in the south is Egypt. And then in the north, you have alternating between different peoples, but it's usually the Assyrians and the Babylonians, and then later the Greeks and the Persians. But like this little strip of land that is Israel-Palestine, that it basically is kind of the buffer zone between the northern and southern powers. And so in a way, they always get a bit more of a pass, because when the powers come through, they're really thinking, like, if you're coming from the north, the Assyrians are on their way to battle the Egyptians. They're not really that interested in the Israelites.
We're just passing through, get the fuck out of my way.
Just destroy a couple of towns on your way, and this, like, it's not the biggest deal. But what we see then is that when we get into the time of Alexander the Great, then their goal is to make a homogeneous society based on Greek language and literature and values. And so that change from the way things were done before, what happens is that instead of saying, oh, we're going to move people around and destroy your cities, we're going to make everything horrible, Alexander just says, oh, we're just going to teach Greek. I mean, we're just going to we're going to make everybody kind of start doing things more like the Greeks do. And so Greek culture, what we call Hellenism, becomes the culture. And this is what the books that are written, anything that are most of the Jewish literature that comes out of the 200s and 100s BC is talking about how to deal with Hellenism.
Mhm.
because there's just this, like, when things come to Jerusalem, and there are naked gymnasiums where there are bathhouses and there's wrestling of naked young men and things like that. It's a problem for a Jewish culture that didn't.
Problem for people from over here as well. I went to Amsterdam and we went to a naked sauna for free. I told them it was our anniversary. We got in for the day. Free naked sauna, free naked steam room. The girlfriend did not happy. Not happy at all.
Okay, that's good to know. But the so it was something that caused a lot of reactions, right? And that is, I think, the climate that we're dealing with when we get to the, the first centuries, is that there has been a power, in a way, a power shift, but away from being a militant power to being a
Mhm.
cultural power.
Mhm.
And with the Romans, so the Romans then take over the area from the Greeks, and that's, kind of moving forward through the hundreds, and by the
But
first.
random thoughts going off in my head and stuff here. You've got the Book of Jubilees, which, as you would have discussed, has it spent this 200 years. It's going up to the 70s. To the temple was destroyed and stuff. And then, as you're now discussing, with Roman culture, taking over and being more mainstream, and rather than them having to hide, they then would have the freedom to. I don't want to use the word canonize, but they don't have to hide it in small groups and create a wee Chinese whisper of their own. They can walk along the street and meet other Christians or meet other Jews or wherever they define themselves from a symbol from this and go, ba ba ba. They can all talk, and it becomes more widespread. So, would you feel that the Book of Jubilees then, with its definitive, what it then became after the 200 years of it being written, was down to the Roman Empire coming in and giving them that cultural freedom rather than having to have churches underground? They can now meet and congregate in public.
Well, I think it's actually, well, yes, but no, the exact opposite. Like, I think Jubilees is more of a reaction to the Greco-Roman culture and power structures, and wants to be very clear. I mean, one of the things that's super important in Jubilees is that nobody should ever marry outside the group. Like, endogamy is the
The
principle
fact
that.
that it was allowed to be promoted, though, that's what I'm mainly focused on.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
think back in the day, so to speak, when the militant
yeah,
was taken over, that they
yeah,
would have had the ability to spread this as
yeah.
well?
Yeah, so I think there's a reason. I think there's a reason why the Book of Jubilees doesn't spread north and west, but it spreads south and east, and that is because of the Roman occupation, or the Roman what happens in the world after the Roman destruction of Jerusalem and of
Hmm.
Judah. So I think that, yes, you're right, that the I mean, it's the same thing that makes Christianity spread, right? That the fact that there are roads, and there is a common language, there's common currency, there's common, trade routes and everything that everybody can use. That makes it possible for things to move around as much as much as they did. But what happens too is that right after the destruction of the temple in the year 70, this is the same time. So basically, what happens? Two things happen very, very quickly after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. On the one hand, so Jews are spread out of the land, and this kind of, they go back and forth until the year 135, when the final revolution is squashed. So it carries on for a bit, but basically, pretty soon after that, there is a rejection of anything that's not written in Hebrew or Aramaic as being authoritative within Judaism. And so and you'll notice, like, in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, whatever we want to call it, the Tanakh, it's Hebrew texts, and they reject the Greek versions of the same texts. So when you look at an early Christian Bible, the early Christian versions of Esther and the book of Daniel, they were longer. The Greek version that was in the Christian Bible, it was just longer and it had more stuff. That probably was actually composed in a Jewish setting, but it still is not accepted within the Jewish Bible because it was written in Greek, that version of it. And so we see that there's that happens. So there's a rejection of Greek by the Jews, and the Christians pretty quickly start to close ranks and develop a canon as well. And right after 70 is when the Gospels are written and things start to be kind of textualized within Christianity. But the Book of Jubilees escapes the south through Egypt probably and gets to Ethiopia somehow. And we don't know exactly what it's doing on its way there, but it's definitely kind of it's in different circles than what is the proto-rabbinic Judaism or the proto-Christianity that we have.
See, this is very interesting because I've been well, I don't want to say I've been reading an awful lot because I don't have freaking time. What I would usually do is find a person like yourself and put a video on or a documentary or usually a lecture or something and listen to it while I'm working. But Coptic, Egyptian being written in the Greek form seems to come around in and around 300, CE, which totally and utterly makes sense with, what I'm looking at also lines in with your timeline. Not to say that you're wrong. It's just interesting, that with this history, that's why Greek and Coptic, it wasn't just something that came along, as you described. They were purely invading at this stage.
Right. It's, I mean, that's the way it is, that there's no reason to be writing Egyptian with Greek inspired letters until the Greeks.
In my head, I was thinking trade.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily see wars and battles. I've looked at different histories, but that particular line of research I'm looking down doesn't include the reasons and the history of that. It's in that particular field. But in my head, the reason I was thinking was information transfer and, just trade.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And I mean, when I mean, it's like we still use the same phrase, follow the money. And I think that's what it's about. It's all about who is buttering your bread or whatever. You're gonna start doing your trade documents in the form that's most appealing to your overlords, and it's always going to be like that.
You follow the money, man. Conversation for offline, but one of the main reasons I voted for Brexit was that Northern Ireland would get special status and we'd be in both the British and the EU, and everybody fought and all the rest of it. Now we're there. Now I'm a little vindicated, but talk for after. Don't hit me. Don't hit me. But that's the reason why working in businesses over here at the level I did, people have ways and means because of the Good Friday Agreement that we, I know people who bought stuff, brought it into the South and just put it on a lorry and legally drove it across to their other, same company, but their storage area in the North, relabeled it and then sold it to Europe at a double the price.
Wow. That's crazy.
But they legally and all the rest of it, and loopholes and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And people in this country are fighting at the minute, as I say, over territory and drugs and this and that and the other. It's not really relevant to the religion. But you watch people who, due to the Good Friday Agreement, have the ability to do this. You look at the way that Protestants and Catholics can come together because I'm patting your back and you're patting my back and we're both getting money. Everybody drives and farmer illegal diesel from over the border in the 90s. It was a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was the ability to do that. And I don't want to say that you can breed out the hatred, but it's going to take 2 or 3 generations of people to... 2 or 3 generations of, just people not caring, so to speak, about the religious nature of it. Yep. And as I say, you follow the money. If everybody gets money, everybody's happy.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it?
That is the key.
If everybody,
everything else will be put aside. Religion will be put aside. My hatred, the fact that your uncle shot my uncle. Did you just give me 100 grand? We're all friends, Yep. So Northern Ireland is the new modern Middle East. Is that
Oh, God.
uh, so, Matt, anything else you would like to add specifically on the Book of Jubilees, thinking that it would be important? You've already become part of Team Richard and you're destroying my argument. Would you like to just knock it out of the ballpark?
Well, I mean, I find it very strange because I'm not here supporting the alien agreement, the alien argument in any way, shape, or form. But you know, but my so I mean, I could walk you through the whole thing, and eventually I will on my channel, I guess, walk us through the Book of Jubilees. But it is just so clear that it is rewriting Genesis and the beginning of Exodus, and it's and by the by the time we get to the final version of it, it is so well thought through. Like it's one of the things that it fixes is a question that Jews would have had or did have in the that period, was how did the patriarchs, the pre-Moses people, how did they live if they had not yet received the law?
Mm-hmm.
Because the law is like the watershed moment for the Jews. It is the giving of the law. That's what defines history. Just like for Christians, it's Jesus something something. For the Jews, it is the giving of the law. And so what happens in Jubilees is that the patriarchs are fixed. Like where they in Genesis and Exodus do little things that they shouldn't have done according to the law, Jubilees goes in and says, "Oh no, they did it according to the law," and a lot of laws are even instituted. And so if you're up to Jubilees chapter 3, when you guys start reading about, oh, you did last week. I did listen to your thing last week. You sent me the link, and I was listening. And
what did you think? Right now, they're straight up, man. Not on a particular topic. The whole thing. What did you think of the episode and how Richard's views and stuff?
What I would say is that I think there were a number of times that I thought that just having a little bit more knowledge of the text and how it came to be would have just solved a lot of the questions and ramblings.
We got hung up. That's my fault. I have a brain thing.
Well, but also he's giving you bad information sometimes. So like so like one thing I definitely wanted to say when I was on here is that he's going off on this Adama thing, and that, at least in the way he formulated it, is wrong.
In watching Esoterica today,
yeah,
actually it was today, on just one thing, he did describe Adam as not one particular person. Adam is Adam, or whatever way you want to pronounce it. It means a group of people. And he specifically said that later in the story, I think it's in what would be known as the second version of Genesis, in that one Genesis, changed it to a person.
Right. Well, I mean, so there's so what I heard him saying is that there is like a linguistic difference.
Yes.
And there's not. So we have one word in Hebrew.
My button fell off.
Oh no. The one word that is Adam. And Adam is the word in Hebrew for humanity or people or whatever. Like it's a collective noun that means mankind, humankind, people. And that is also used as a proper name for the first man.
Yeah.
And so and when you read Genesis chapter 1 and 2, it is not clear whether we're talking about humankind or a specific person. And that is going to be you putting your own reading into it in most of those cases.
Right. Well, this is the thing I was just about to say to you. You must be also prophetic. That's what I try as best as I can with Richard to point out, that as consistent as he is, and he is consistent, in his ideas. I mentioned before we went live that he would directly disagree with Christian text to be consistent. That's a wonderful example you just gave. Excuse me. That is one of those times where I feel if I can play the part of Richard watching this back, love you, Richard, trying to be my best. I would say that I don't know where he got the Adam and Adama from. I don't know, maybe mixing in Greek or something like that. Or
well, but he might have actually picked it up honestly, but just forgotten what the argument was, because what the word Adama does mean is earth or ground.
Oh.
And so it's actually a much better play on words that's going on, because when you read Genesis 2, it's like so Adam is created from the Adamah. So the humanity is made out of the earth.
I will give you this little bit of information, and I know that you said that you could stay, for a certain period of time or whatever. This has been wonderful. I want to bring other people on, if at all possible, maybe 15 more minutes or so. If you do, if you need to take a pee break or whatever, we'll swap it to an after party. And but to be Richard, I'm not sure, as I say, where he got it from, but it's the consistency that he must maintain. And what I try to do with these readings is to point out that I don't want to say he's cherry picking, because when you say cherry picking, it's usually quote mining or something from this. But right. Richard has such a wide view of what his religion is, that it's cherry picking religions, and I want him to see what you just pointed out, which is that he is pointing his own point of view on it. And what I've got back from on a few occasions is, well, don't we all put our own point of view on it?
Oh, yeah,
we do,
totally.
Yes. But everybody is 99% aligned with the rest of the flipping world. We all have that, my shade of blue is different than your shade of blue, but it's both fucking think it's blue.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that this is my, I don't know, I don't want to say my goal in life, because I think I have other goals that are much more important.
Fatherhood.
For me.
You have kids.
I have kids. I want to, I don't know. It doesn't matter. I don't need to go down that road. But anyway, what I was going to say
I love my daughter.
Something important for me here in life is to be able to talk about what we do know, so that then we can wonder about what we don't know. And so that's where, like, when I listen to something like an argument saying, oh, well, the Adam and the Adamah is two different things, like, well, you know what, actually not. So we can talk about it, but maybe there's still an interesting discussion to be had. But that kind of detail, I think, needs to be right. And just like the same thing, like where you guys were talking about the so the time after, or when they're put in the garden, right? This is one of those great things where the man and the woman don't get to go into the garden at the same time. And because you noticed that, didn't you? That
I didn't actually listen to a goddamn thing you were saying for 1 wee minute, because your daughter said in the chat that she's the best she could know, and I was texting back to her that being a dad and hearing your child or your daughter say that about you is wonderful. My wee girl on the way home the other day told me I was a great dad, even though I slept in for an hour extra. She said, it doesn't matter, I know you work hard, you're still a great dad. And yeah.
Mia is the best. She is. She's the coolest kid.
My wee girl didn't wipe me out with a freaking.
Other than my other kids, of course. I love all my kids the same. Don't worry.
She's the only one here. The rest aren't listening.
The only one commenting. So,
thank you, Mia, as well, for coming by. I really do appreciate your support. I know your daddy's here and all, but I really appreciate it talking in the chat, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, but I mean, my whole thing is just that, I think it's great to see the way you guys are out here trying to make sense of it, and that's what it's about, isn't it? I mean, no one owns knowledge, and no one owns interpretation, but we can help enrich each other and kind of get past some of the things that might be demonstrably wrong.
Now, if I can, right, Oppenheimer, if we can quote Oppenheimer, I am the man, the destroyer of worlds, I feel in this moment, with just what you said and my brain firing, that you are a weapon of mass destruction for the Christians and can be used in two ways, right? And there's the way that, if I can make an analogy, that I aim to be. And I've just, so to speak, you're there, the knowledge is great. It's wonderful to give this knowledge out, and people should know this knowledge. But nobody needs to use this knowledge against the dirty commies or whatever. I feel there's, I don't want, your knowledge is scholar. It is straight up the middle. It has no feelings either way or the other. As you've pointed out, it is the way it is, and we guess with as much inference as we can. At the end of the day, without a time machine, you can't know. Were you there? Were you there?
Right.
So we go off this as best we can, but this information shouldn't be used to militarize atheists and be used to go, fuck you Christians, you're wrong.
Right.
The best way to move forward is to introduce conversation and go, have you heard about this? Have you heard about this cool guy? Have you read this paper? Introduce and have conversation on this, as I think you've done wonderfully tonight, Matt, with me. It's just been I don't want it to end. It's been great. We'll keep it going. But, I think a conversation like this and promoting information sharing rather than information bashing is definitely an approach that we should be going forward. So I really do thank you for coming on tonight.
Yeah, no problem. And that's exactly how I feel. I mean, I did a lecture series here in my little village here in Norway a few years ago. They asked me to come and do something on like they called it a Bible scholar's view of the Bible or something. And they asked me to just talk about once a month for a year, do a lecture on a topic I wanted, and so I went through the Bible and did these 8 lectures. And from my perspective, I was basically telling them that, the Bible isn't true every week. That's kind of, in the end, the arguments and are what bring me to that conclusion. But I had, a room full of people, like 100 people came out every week. It was crazy. And they sat there, and afterward, the Christians would come up to me and say, "This is amazing. You confirmed everything I've always believed in." And the atheists would come up and say, "This is amazing. You confirmed everything I've always believed in."
Yeah.
And it's just like, and that's what's interesting about scholarship, is that you can present it in a way that people can at least take away from it that they've learned something and they're gaining knowledge, but it doesn't mean that you're out there trying to ruin people's lives.
Yeah. Like I there's a hierarchy obviously at work,
Yeah.
I'm in charge of one thing, then there's a guy in charge of me, and then there's a guy in charge of him, and then the boss, and then there's a whole bullshit after that don't care. But the guy, just before the boss, I recently mentioned to him that, did the YouTube channel and stuff like this, and did it with Richard and stuff. And I think actually I think we picked on Jill. I don't know if you've had interactions with Jesus as Lord yet. I hope to God you never do. All right. He's my favorite troll, and I have a small spot in my heart for him, but we'll not get down that route.
Nice.
But he's a Calvinist, and I was mentioning this, and this particular guy, we'll call Mr. A, was walking past, and he said to me, "Oh, Calvinism, Robbie," and we started talking and stuff, and I was doing research for Jubilees, before we went and did live, and we started a conversation. He's a Calvinist. He speaks Greek, and we would now talk more and banter back and forth, and have created, I don't want to say a friendship or anything, because we always had to interact, but our banter is better. Our crack is better because we have an understanding of each other. In Ireland, you give somebody an insult, it means you love them. It's like, so you can make wee digs at each other and stuff like that. And as I say, I had the headphones in at work doing some Jubilees research, and I had my head down, and all I heard was my name. And I looked up, and he was like, "You look really sad, Robbie. You're looking at it." I was like, "No, I'm learning all about your demons. I'm going to be, doing my show." And I mentioned to him that you were coming on, and he told me that he spent 1.5 years learning Greek. So he does know a wee bit of Greek and stuff, but
nice.
I definitely want to recommend. I'm going to push him to watch this episode tonight. I think it was very good, Matt, and I really do appreciate you coming on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link in the chat for anyone that wants to come in, and Yeah, I really, I can't say thank you enough, Matt. I really would like it if you lived in America right now, because it would
Yeah.
suit my times better. Because I want to make you my new best friend. Like,
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I mean, it's now what 11 o'clock over here in Norway, so it's I'm not great at being up too much later than this, so I have a hard time starting a show this late. But
yeah,
did
we
Richard
would
never
just
even
be
show up at
starting now,
all?
and we would
Did
have
he
another hour left, considering what
did he show up at all? Have
not
you?
yet.
So he didn't even make the normal start time.
No, it's 10 o'clock here.
Oh, 10 here. Yeah. Is
No,
that what
it's
time you
mid.
usually
No,
start?
our normal start time
Yeah.
is midnight for you.
Oh God. Yeah. No, sorry. That
Fuck
wouldn't.
off, Rabbi.
That's gonna be
Fuck
hard.
off.
Wait till in June I'll be in the US. Then I can I can jump on again.
Yeah, we'll
That'll
do
be
something probably around you, but I definitely do want to get you back. I will make sure the next time that we do it, we will do it at the exact same time, and I will buy a cattle prod. I will send it to Richard's sister, who does not live, or sorry, Richard's brother, who doesn't live too far away, and I will get them to go out and prod them
yeah.
because he's always on Twitter, and I can tweet it back.
Well,
And
we can hope that Richard was taken to meet some aliens or something in the meantime.
oh, there's a story. Oh my goodness, I have so many stories about Richard, Matt. Give me 15 minutes offline. We can tell you some stories. But the links in the chat. If anyone wants to come in, Dr. Matt it's getting late, so you maybe get 5-10 minutes. I'm gonna try and keep him here for as long as possible because he's my new best friend. But thanks specifically to Maya for coming in, or Mia for coming in and supporting her father. Thanks for all my Patreons and all the people and the regulars and everybody who came by. I really didn't think we would get as many viewers tonight as we did, considering it was 2.5 hours earlier. But Dr. Matt's got the big brain, all the wrinkles, no smooth brain. It's got loads of wrinkles. So huge thanks to Dr. Matt. Huge thanks to everybody for coming. And I don't know about the Saturday streams anymore. There's a few people who've started streaming at that time on a Saturday. So I'm not too sure if I want to overlap and stuff. We might have to do a thing. Me and Stuhl's been talking about doing an Irish crack stream. So that's in the works. And there's a few things there. But yeah, we'll definitely be back next Tuesday at the usual time with Richard, making fun of him for not turning up for this. And if anybody joins the link that I posted, I'll be having an after party with Matt, not without Matt. He's in Norway. And Dr. Matt, round up. The floor is yours. Whatever you want to say about the book, whatever you want to say about the show you watched, whatever you want to promote on your channel, it's all yours, man. Go for it.
Yeah, no, just thanks for having me. I appreciate the fact that you reached out, and I mean, this is I spent too many years researching the Book of Jubilees, so it's good to finally get to talk about it in a way that seems like people want to hear. So that's great. But for me, it's just keep that that openness in going into the text and asking every single time you read something, look for what it is commenting on, changing, or working with out of Genesis. And just kind of be asking that question, what is going on here? And because for me, it is a textual commentary.
Right. There's a question. Richard, as you said, can be biased in his translations, right? I did try and point out, I don't know if it was in the episode you've seen, that, there's two different possibilities, and Richard will take the one that's more prominent to his. You did say, yeah. So would you have a website or anywhere that would be very handy for me? Because Richard has his ones that he prefers, and he can go blah, 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 and up it pops, and it supports him because he's biased and spent these times looking. Would you have a resource online that I would be able to retort with and say this is the general consensus, or this is the translation, or is there a website you know of like that you would use possibly?
So, I mean, I use a
your
little
brand
more expensive resources than that, but I tell you what, I will see what I may have laying around that might be helpful to you, and I will send you some
I
stuff.
have ways and means and people on the internet. Money doesn't matter if it's digital. We'll just say that.
Yeah, I'm just trying not to say that I have ways and means and have things that I shouldn't.
I don't
have.
care. It's my channel. We already get demonetized.
I don't. I get things, by the legal means, and I could point you in the direction of things.
Totally legal cigarette I'm rolling as well. Yes.
Yeah.
So, on that, Dr. Matt, share your channel, shield your channel. If any of my mods would do an awful nice thing and post 2 things in my chat. Number 1, his website. Number 2, Matt's actual YouTube channel. Any of the mods, post it like crazy. Please do that. It's in the description. So you just have to copy and paste in the description. Do shill it out. Man's got 4,000 subscribers and 2 videos. Come on.
Yeah. I did this thing. So if you want
this thing,
people were I did this. I did an interview with Derek on Mythvision, and where I basically told my deconversion story, and that. So I mean, if you want to hear me blather on about living in West Africa and Mali, West Africa, and being a crazy. Sorry, not crazy. We're not judging, but being doing things that I have since thought probably weren't the best decisions of my life. But there you go. But it's like, I mean, it took off. Like, I think he has 175,000 views on that video that we did on Mythvision. And then so he got people interested in my channel. So I picked up some
you did
some
at the end of the day, man,
from the table of Mythvision.
At the end of the day, if I went in Mythvision, I would not have 4,000 subscribers after it, and I already have fucking 400 videos or something. It's all down to the person. I have a smooth head. You've got the wrinkly brain. It's lots of knowledge there. Should be taken advantage of. Do not weaponize Dr. Matt, people out there, okay? And on that, yes, we're going to end. I've got the link out there. If anyone wants to join or anything like that, we'll have a bit of banter in the background. And with that, thank you everybody who supports the channel. Thank you everybody who came by tonight. And new best friend. Going to have him back for lots of episodes if we can. And with that, people, don't forget to think for yourselves. I'm messing up between the scenes and it's not really working, so we need to make this go away. We are live. Hi everybody, thanks for coming back. Andy has joined us, and if I can again blow some smoke up Dr. Matt's ass, that was one of the best shows I've done in a very long time, man. I really appreciate you coming on, and you know, the banter was good. I feel that we both have similar interests, and I really like the way you called me psychic basically twice, you know. I tell everybody I'm psychic.
You know, when I say it takes one to know one.
We say this about assholes as well.
That's where I heard.
There we go. Found it. Sorry. There we go. Now we're sorted. Too many scenes. Fucking OBS. Everybody should be seeing something pretty now. Yeah. So to give a wee bit of backstory, Dr. Matt, we talked about it slightly before it. I know you said it in a jokey way. You were like, I was a Christian for so long and got so far down the rabbit hole that when I became an atheist, I had fuck all else to do. But you're good at what you do. You communicate very well at what you do. From what I've seen of you, which is tonight, I'm totally biased. Fantastic. You know, any question I came to you, it's okay to say I don't know, but you didn't. You always had something back and forth, and I feel that, like myself, but not as educated as myself, there's an enjoyment that you get from it. There's, you know, plus you get to fucking play with the Dead Sea Scrolls, so fuck you. But
yeah, I mean, and again, like I mean, this is literally the thing I know. So it's like I won't apologize at this stage, but I will definitely have plenty of things I could say that I didn't know before. But just so happens that when we talk about the Jubilees, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the relationships between different ways of thinking about the scrolls and society and all that kind of stuff. That is what I've spent at least the past 6 or 7 years really thinking about. And so when
so you like
down the path of least resistance.
Not like I know that you gave me credit earlier for reaching out to you, but what I thought what gave me an insight to your personality and stuff like that, and the way that we talked in DMs, was I didn't reach out to you. What actually happened, if I'm pretty sure we looked through Twitter, is I asked Dr. Kip if he would come on and talk about it, and you come in with your snarky big Norwegian, big American in Norway dick swinging going, you don't know anything about Jubilees.
I forgot.
And he was like, no, but you do.
I really did. I apologize.
No, don't apologize, man, because have confidence. Have confidence in what you're good at. Well, to be desperately fair, right? What is the odds that in this community, on the Book of fucking Jubilees, that there would be a person who did their dissertation and is now spending their PhD or whatever, your research, doing that in the community? The odds of that is very little. Getting someone who knows about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the main question I wanted to put forth to Dr. Kip, I put forth to you, which was about the age range and how long it is in the community. That sort of conversation was where I was aiming to confirm mine and make Dr. Kip Team Math Pig. But then I went and got the actual expert, and he's now Team Richard. And
again, you keep saying that, but I really feel like I'm not on it really.
No, but
I have my own side.
I understand that you have your own side, but knowing Richard, his arguments are based on the fact that he has said to me that the story must be original. The story must be the first. So every time you said that Jubilees was, I'm going to, paraphrase, designed to add to Genesis, that means Genesis came first. So he can just throw my argument out the fucking window. Like, it's,
I don't think Genesis is first. I just think Genesis is before. And I would say there was something else first before that.
Oh.
So I mean, my whole methodology, I would call it deception. It is just the fact that things are received into new context, transmitted into new context over and over and over again.
Dr. Matt, I do apologize. I had you muted with the volume up instead of you unmuted. What I actually did was turn the it's because of the timer. I turned the music up instead of turning you up. The music should now be lower. Everybody should be able to hear Dr. Matt.
So I've been rambling with nobody even hearing me.
Oh no, they've heard you. You're just very low. But I do apologize. It should be. Yeah, I fucked up. All right, fuck off.
That's okay. It's okay.
So how many experts are there in the field you're in?
So in the Dead Sea Scrolls in general, I would say, I don't know, there's anywhere from, I guess, 50 to 100 of us that I see in the kind of as being in the field. Maybe some more, but I mean, it's a fairly small group.
And someone like Kip Davis would be in that circle.
Yes, yeah, Kip Davis is definitely in that. And
so there's 50 to 100 people like you in the world, and we know of 2 of them.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, I physically
That's amazing.
To one person out of a field of, we're gonna go with 45 because I like to exaggerate. Yeah. Out of 8.5 billion people in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so and I mean, so yeah, I mean, you are lucky on that, because Kip is a good friend of mine, and he lived in Norway for 3 years when he was doing a postdoc, and doing research on the Dead Sea Scrolls fragments that turned out to be forgeries at the Skøyen collection in Oslo, and so we got to know each other then because there's not many people working on the Dead Sea Scrolls in Norway, so we all know each other very well. And so the fact that Kip was here then was how we got.
I have never interacted with Kip except for them 2 messages. I think even one, and then you came swinging dick, and then me and you started talking.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, but that's Kip's a really good guy, and he just he has been the forgery detector, and then has done a lot of really good work on trying to figure out how we can detect forgeries and what the methodologies are on that. And so we've been good friends ever since he was in Norway. But yeah, so there's a good bunch of people throughout Europe, and in the US there's kind of varying degrees. There's some full-on Dead Sea Scrolls scholars, but there's a lot of people that are what I would call biblical scholars that play with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that's a different thing. And so
there's a lot of people who aren't biblical scholars who play with Dead Sea Scrolls too.
Yeah, it's true.
Dirty tissues is a different thing, Dargendorf. That's a different
thing. But I mean, that's a really good point. But because that's one of the things that is really challenging when you're in the field, being one of the people that goes into the scrollery, can look at the actual scrolls, do work on them firsthand. Like what we communicate out to the broader community of scholars or of people that are interested hasn't always been the best. Like, I mean, this is, the first generation of scholars was very religious, and so was really the second generation. Like, so most of the scholars that have worked with the Dead Sea Scrolls have had a pretty clear religious conviction, and I think that's influenced the way they've talked about the scrolls and their materiality, what they are, and how they can be used, and what they support of readings and things like that. And so it's only now that we get a kind of a generation of scholars that are asking questions in a completely different way that's much more critical.
Well, that's the thing. You leave your religion at the door. There's, as we mentioned before, offline before the first show, Esoterica. If anyone hasn't watched Esoterica, Very, very good scholarly channel. Does delve a wee bit into the occult and stuff like that, but has a very good, I would say objective view upon it. And one of the recent videos I did watch was he specifically said, I check my religion at the door. You know, anybody, I'm going to paraphrase and put an Irish on it, but anybody who ignores the history or ignores the religion is being bad to both of them. I can't remember the exact nice word he used, but disrespectful probably, I think it was disrespectful to both. If you ignore one, you're disrespectful to both. I think that's what he was trying to put across. But
yeah,
you know, it is that way. You know, I refer to my mother as a spiritual Christian because through myself, and she would have been, you know, Northern Ireland and all this, but very Christian and Protestant. She raised me to be a skeptic. She raised me to read the Hardy Boys, to have 500 questions and answers as a book and stuff like that. And I have a memory of me and one of my friends at the time who was religious and asked me a question, and my mother laughed and walked out of the room. And him, as a person who goes to church more often than I did, it was like, what's funny? He knows the Bible better than you. See you later. She still considers her Christian, and we can banter back and forth. And I don't know, I'm rambling now because he's on the whiskey and I've had the wine. So, yeah.
And I've had one drink this year.
This year.
How many cigarettes have you had, though, Andy?
Today?
Today
was a slow day, so maybe 60.
Whew. You see? Everybody has their vices.
Pick your poison. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody has their vices. I'm doing well. I've got one bag of tobacco now to last me a week instead of buying a packet of figs a day.
Yeah. Circling back to being respectful of the source material, what always gets my goat is when you have, for example, fundamentalists or evangelicals refusing to see for example, the Old Testament for what it is. They only see it through their Christian lens.
Yep.
And I'm not a believer, but I like this stuff, and I think it's interesting. I think the meta stuff is interesting. I don't care how big a tabernacle was or something. Well, maybe it could have been interesting.
It's a spaceship. It's a spaceship. Remember where you are.
No, it's not
15 minutes to Richard turns up. 15 minutes.
it's not a spaceship. I think it's a tent or something. I don't even know.
Definitely a tent. Yeah.
Yeah. But it gets my goat when they don't.
Thank you, Joe.
They don't regard the source material as what it is.
Yep. And I completely agree. That's one of the, well, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I am in the situation I'm in, being a former believer who works with this kind of stuff, is that, like, growing up, I was always like super literal. Like this was one of those things, like my parents always like told me stories about, like, we would be out driving and there will be a road sign that says narrow road 1,000 feet. And I'd be like, is 1,000 feet a narrow road? You know, and like that kind of, somebody, people make off the cuff comments, and I would take everything literally. And so
that is very funny, because just on that topic, totally to interject, on camping last year, my wee girl did the exact same thing. We went up a back road and went off the map with no name, and she goes, "Oh, there's no name on the map, Daddy, and there's grass growing up the road. This must be a very old road." Just purely logical, literal, seeing it as it is.
Yep. And I think I took that into working with or reading texts. I would read them and I would say, this is what the text says. And then I started reading literature about it, and you learn to do the work in a way that's saying, okay, what are we dealing with? And then I would read what the Christian interpretation was, and I'd say, but that's not what the text says, and that's not the historical interpretation of it. So then it's something else. And
we aren't healed by his stripes.
Right, exactly. And there were no stripes. I mean, it's like, this is the once you learn that Psalm 22 was used to compose the death scene of Jesus, not that Psalm 22 was a prophecy about it, for which was fulfilled, then suddenly, like, everything changes, right? And so for me, thinking that I can accept that Christians do that, but I would just like them to be honest about it, that what they're doing is throwing out the primary interpretation and choosing one that is contingent upon their view of what that text is.
Exactly. That's what we try to point out with Richard. It's I get that you're consistent, but you're twisting certain parts. A good 90% of what you have, I can see your point of view. And if you've watched a long part of the series, Matt, not only is Richard Madsen, he's Demolished Doctrine. That's his name, his YouTube channel, and there's Demolished Doctrine, which is looking at it from his point of view, but creating a secondary religion. He says meteorites, I say volcano exploding. You can look at it in an internal, critique and come up with another religion. And you can twist it and turn it any goddamn way you want.
Yep. And I'm perfectly happy to say that I'm biased, and I will be proven wrong in many of the things that I think are correct. But my worldview also says that if that happens, then I've learned something, and I should adapt. And if I find evidence that is to the contrary of what I think, I don't think it would be very smart to then just deny that evidence. I would want to adapt to it.
Yeah, well, here, tonight's episode has been an entire proof of that. I was under the understanding that, Jubilees was more verbal than it was written. I think Genesis is what, 500?
Sometime after 500, but yeah. So
right. Arbitrary number,
Arbitrary. Let's throw it in 5-4 somewhere.
And as I pointed out earlier, the version, the idea that I was putting forth to Richard was that there was this little area on the other side of the mountain that was segregated for a period of time, and they continued the Jubilees. Then there was a mixture. That was the argument that I was putting forward.
Nope, I don't buy it.
Fucking shit. Go.
But I mean, I think there may be some traditions there that you could say are traditions that could have circulated independently of Genesis or something. And like the Enochic stuff. So I think Enoch, you have a much better case for that kind of line of thinking, because in the Enochic material, we're so far from Genesis. Like there's those points where Enoch is a figure in Genesis. Okay, fine. And it says that he went and walked with the angels, or we went and walked with the gods. And then that is like kind of this bridge to this whole massive amount of Enochic literature. But in the end, like Jubilees is literally following what Genesis does the whole way, whereas Enoch just has this one little tangent where it connects. And so it's a completely different thing.
What is your thoughts on, just as you mentioned, Enoch and stuff like that? I might have spent about 4 days doing a whole John Dee and Enochian language. And then, do you know what I'm talking of?
I don't think so. John Dee and Enochian.
The reason it's called Enochian is because it's the language of the angels. It is these guys. Oh. John Dee was the very first person who signed his letters when he was performing his Secret Service duties to the Queen as 007. It's where James Bond's number comes from. He was friends with Queen Elizabeth, I think it is. I can't remember which one. They grew up together. But he spent about 7 or 8 years going through Europe with another guy doing is it seething? Supposedly they got a philosopher's stone, and they had a very in-depth language, Enochian. It's like the occult is also part of my, esoteric. It's all.
I hear you. I hear you.
That's why you're my new best friend. So I'm going to just give you the book that they come up with, because like. The angels, they asked the angels for the Book of Enoch, right? Check this out, man. They asked the angels for the Book of Enoch.
Of course they did.
Of course they did, because they knew of it from references that you're making references to earlier in the show, like the Jubilees. We've got 2 lines, so we know it existed, but we didn't get it to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah?
Well, but there are bits of Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes, but what I mean is, before the Dead Sea Scrolls, there was
Yeah.
books of reference to Enoch, but no book of Enoch.
Okay.
So one of the first things that they asked the angels for in their siring, seething, I can't remember the name. Woman looks into a crystal ball, crystal thing. They talk to people. You know, it's some fucking name begins with an S. And they couldn't give them the Book of Enoch, so they give them the tablets that Enoch seen. And over the course of, I think, 7 years, these two guys broke it down. There was a breakdown of what the language was. Then over 7 years, there was grammar and syntax. It was all built up. It's a whole big, massive thing. And then there's the guy who was doing the crystal ball bullshit and the guy that was doing the translating. The guy that's doing the translating is John Dee. He's got all the money. And I think what happened at the end is the guy got sick of doing it because he said that the angel said that they had to share everything, including their wives. Then they had a big orgy and then they fell out. They didn't speak after about 3 months after the orgy.
That sounds sort of like Book of Mormon material.
Yeah, exactly. That's what sounded exactly like the Book of Mormon.
I'm doing a very bad job of describing it. It is similar to the Book of Mormon, but John Dee and a guy, I can't remember his name because he had two names. But yeah, just type in John Dee Enochian Esoterica. It's a channel you know, it's a channel you respect, and they did a very good breakdown on it. It's very interesting. I like his humor as well, because he makes a joke and doesn't laugh. He just goes, meh. You know.
Oh well, I will have to put that on my list of things I need to know more about.
No. That's on the list of things I don't need to know anything about.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's
It's
very strange.
It's very strange. It's very entertaining. Like as a person,
whatever they produced, what was it called?
They refer to it now as the Enochian language, although John Dee and the other guy who I can't remember the name of that created it didn't refer to it as Enochian. They referred to it as the angelic language or some other thing or whatever the fuck it was. It was all based on Jubilees sort of thing. It was a circle with the whole calendar and all of that sort of stuff.
And when did this happen?
Queen Elizabeth II. John Dee. Just type in John Dee.
The rest of the world doesn't orient itself according to the British royalty.
The second, that's the one that just died, isn't she?
I have no idea, man. All right, I go down so many.
This is older than that. It's older than that.
Dr. Matt, right? Mr. Monger, Matt,
yes,
right? Whatever you would like to be referred to.
Whatever you want to call me. I'm known by many names.
Batman. Like these are your interests, and this is what you've spent, as you said, 20 years. So what do you do as entertainment where you don't have to think? Like there's moments in the living room where I'm maybe crafting or diddling or doing a wee thing.
Yeah.
And you just have background noise, as I would refer to it.
Yeah.
You know, Space Truckers from 1984 was on here the other night with fucking me and Stu because we were just talking and we needed background noise. You know, What would you put on? I would put these things on, like John Dee and that sort of stuff. I'm working entertainment. You know.
No, I do listen to a lot of a lot of stuff like on Myth Vision. I mean, all that kind of stuff because it's scholarly, and I mean, so a lot of names that go on through Derek's channel I do know. So that's kind of a thing for me to stay updated. I listen to the scholarly channels, but to be completely honest, I watched the American version of The Office on repeat. So I watched that.
Oh, his internet broke. Oh, look at that.
Oh, you cut me off because I said the American version of The Office.
There's also a German version.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he gone too. And the British version's shit as well.
I don't know. I don't watch popular TV.
Yeah.
No, that's my guilty pleasure. That's what I do when I'm just trying to relax, and that's
Yeah. Yeah. So if I'm at work and I have to like sit up the stairs for an hour collecting wires off a list to make a kit for this, that, and the other, and all the rest of it, after a while, when you do it 20 times, it becomes mundane where you don't have to think. You go and lift the thing, you tick it off the list. You lift the thing, you tick it off the list. You know, the occult and stuff like that is quite interesting to me. I don't want to say that I'm Iron Man from the Ninth Gate, but I fucking love that movie. Like, I went so far as checking the price of an occult grimoire the other day, and I ain't got €800. Like, I really don't. But I would love an old grimoire from like freaking, I think it was the 14th or the 15th century. No, 1400 or 1500. But yeah, like something that old would be a few years ago. This is how much I love Richard, right? And I'm now rambling. It's official. I'm now rambling. I went looking to see if I could find the oldest version of the King James Bible that I could find. I went to old bookstores and all the rest of it, and I found one in a weird ass area. Don't you? Up an alleyway down in some sort of shopping center thing. Everything's in boxes. There's no organization. It's not a library. It's one old guy. And I asked him for his theology department or religious department, pointed me to some books out the back, and I got an 1864 Cruden's Concordance.
nice.
Now, it was a hardback front and back, but the bind itself was broken and someone had put, tape on it or whatever. But I was very proud of this, and I bought it for Richard, and it cost more than the book to post it to him because, as so far away.
Yeah.
And we said that we'd ever meet, we'd get, but we'd on for a while, and I had it just sitting on the shelf. And I know a young earth creationist at work who was very good to me when I first started working there. He trained me up. Me and him still swap chocolates. If his wife makes something fancy from Poland, he's Polish, yeah. Try this Polish scone instead of an English scone. It is a scone, not a scone. And we're still friends. Motherfucker put his hands on me one time to try and heal me. All right.
Ooh.
And then saying that, he took me to his house and made me food, and we had a thing and all. But he's a very religious person. He takes it very serious. He holds Christian services at his house, but he's not the pastor. And I give him this book as a thank you. I give him this concordance as a thank you. And about 2 weeks later, he told me he'd give it to his pastor that I've never fucking met, that doesn't even speak English. He's
What?
He's not. He doesn't stay here. That was rude. That was very rude of me.
Mm-hmm.
That was exceptionally rude of me. But the book is in English. That was the point I was making. The guy doesn't read or speak English, and he gave him this because he respects that guy. But it was a present that meant something to me that I give to another person, and he just went, "This is brilliant. Give it to someone else," and that annoyed me. And I didn't mean it in a racist way. I do apologize. It's late. I'm drinking. I'm going to go hide now. But it was the point, he can't appreciate it. That was where I was going.
Yeah. I saw it. There's a question over there in the chat that I thought would be good to answer. Joe Nade says, you just said you remain open to new evidence. Have you considered the Islamic view of Jesus as the Messiah? It rejects problematic church dogma and reconciles us with Jesus and monotheism. And I would say, I've read the Quran and done my due diligence on that side of things, I guess, like as interest. But I think of Islam in the same way as I think of Christianity or other things, that it's just so obviously building on and adjusting earlier traditions. And sure, it might smooth over some problems of thinking of what Jesus is or whatever, but it
Well, that's it.
doesn't
Richard doesn't
doesn't
describe
solve, it
himself.
doesn't solve all the problems. It's just I mean, it might fix a little bit of something here and there, but I think there's a lot more deeply problematic issues that come with an Islamic theology. And so, like, I just I don't actually feel like I need a savior. I guess I'm gonna say I think that's the
Yeah.
I don't need a dogma about being saved, because I don't believe that there is a salvation. I don't believe that there's a world in which we're created destined to be tortured for eternity, or ruined, or whatever, just because we weren't made right or weren't given a clear view of what the right answers were. And so I just don't think there's any need for a
No.
Jesus
Uh,
Messiah at all.
The thing that we can do is, again, being a father and stuff like that. My wee girl runs to the front door. She jumps up and down and she's won. I'm like, honey, I get that you've won, but if you beat somebody, you teach them how to be better. You don't. As I said to you, it's all about saying you ought to do this without using the fucking word ought, because I hate the word ought. Oh, Stephanie's here. But it's hi, Stephanie.
Hello, Stephanie.
It's
Hi,
about
Stephanie.
teaching them how to think, teaching them morality and stuff like that. Everybody here.
What's the map of behind you, Stephanie?
That is a map of Casco Bay. It's a chart of the region I sail in quite a bit.
Okay. And where is Casco Bay?
On the coast of Maine.
On the coast of Maine. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do have a fjord.
You have
One
a
of the
fjord.
few. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Not here, about 4 hours down the coast.
Okay, cool.
So, whatever. It's called Somme Sound. Anyway, I figured that would be a connection to Norway,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Used to be.
So
yeah. go ahead.
So I came in because I was fascinated with your talk about talking about the Hebrew language and the roots of Adam and Adama.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people don't know how Semitic languages work in terms of triliteral roots.
Yeah, what does that mean? Because you wrote that in chat.
Well, perhaps Dr. Matt could explain it. I studied Arabic when I was in college, and it's many, many years since I was in college, but it was one of the things about the language that was fascinating to me, that, what you're dealing with. First of all, understand that Semitic languages traditionally don't have vowels. You find out what the vowels are with diacritical marks all throughout the text. So if you're reading the text and you don't know the context of the text, you kind of have to fill in the pronunciations, which is one reason that some translations get it wrong, because how is this particular word pointed? Is it an I sound? Is it an A sound? Is it a Y sound? What's in there? And I think that's something that people often miss. So I was just wondering for instance, Adam can mean man, or mankind,
right,
or earthling, or red ochre, which comes from earth. Right. I mean, just ADM, and you can, depending on how it's pointed, it can mean any of these things, which is why if you're unfamiliar with that concept and you just simply go to a reference and you don't get beyond what is that consonantal root, right, you miss an awful lot. It also makes for really cool double entendres in Arabic or Hebrew or Phoenician or any of the North or South Semitic languages. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No. Thanks. And I think that's a really good point. And thank you for pointing that out, because I should have been clear about why it is so obvious for me, knowing the Hebrew, that these things can mean this and only this. Like we know that earth, like you said, earth and the color red or red ochre or whatever we want to call it, like the color of the red clay is basically what it is. That it and this is probably connected, right? So the basic meaning is the earth. It's the ground. It's the tangible thing, and then it also becomes the color, so extracted from the same root. These three consonants, you can add a sound to it, a vowel to it that makes it to be the color of the earth or something. That we can talk about the color of the earth, and that's also a semantic development that is pretty normal, right? Within semantics, we know that normally things are the tangible, physical, embodied thing first, and then other meanings are developments of those things. It's just a normal thing. But that the connections are obvious within the language, because when you have the same three consonants, you're always going to associate the meanings together. And that's why the play on words between Adam and Adamah is so clear when you look at it in Hebrew, because that's the way Hebrew works. That it's like related roots are just connected by their semantics. And so when, like, the best example is that I think is the word for to write, which is the same in Arabic as Hebrew, which is kataba or katab, and it means like it's a we would say a K and a T and a B or whatever, and you can conjugate that in so many ways that as a verb it can mean to write, but you can also conjugate it as to dictate, like to make someone write, or you can conjugate it as to have written, or to write in the future, or to will be written, or what, all these things. And you can conjugate it as a noun, and you can just change the vowels and it becomes a book, or a dictation, or or an inscription, or an engraving, and so you have all these different ways of augmenting these three consonants, and it's systematic across all of these lexical roots.
And another good example, at least in Arabic, is Quran.
Right.
Like Ikra means recite. Al-Quran al-Qudsi is the Holy Quran, the holy recitation.
Yeah.
Which is what, in theory, Gabriel told Muhammad to do. Recite. Right. Yeah. Ikra. Ya Sayyidi. Come on. Yeah. And also Bait, what is it? BRK, the root BRK.
Yeah.
It's derived from the word for knee.
Yeah, exactly.
The meaning of the meaning, or the original meaning of the thing is knee. Yep. And baraka is to bend the knee. It also means blessing, because what do you do when you bend the knee? You convey a blessing. Yep. You know, it's fascinating the way the languages are built. They're built that way, and it's a completely foreign concept, really, linguistically, to Indo-European languages.
Yeah, and it's really like that's something that we just can't make clear in a translation either. Like when these plays on words are made, like that, like when it says in Genesis that we will call him man because from the earth he was taken. It just you don't hear it. Right?
Another possible meaning is blood red, and the blood is related to the ochre in the earth, which is and that seems like it's spread throughout mankind, throughout humankind. Yeah, that red ochre was a holy thing in antiquity, and in even going back to prehistory, even going back to the Neanderthals. Red ochre burials were very, very common because red, the color of blood, et cetera, and so forth. Right. And one thing that I think is missing in meaning is you might as well call Adam the earthling.
Yep. And that, but then that really does sound like an alien.
It does. It does. And but I don't know if Richard even makes that connection. But it's but it also touches on spirituality, because the spiritual meaning of the text, or the numinous meaning of the text, because the text is in my view, most holy texts throughout the world that are considered holy texts are words that are meant to give meaning to the experience of life that we all have. We're born, we're here for a little while, then we die. How come? And a whole bunch of that. You read the Bhagavad Gita, that's what that's all about. You read the Bible, that's what that's all about. You read, hell, you could read the Silmarillion, and that's what that's all about. But the whole idea, if you go to that root, meaning earth, blah blah blah, we're creatures of this earth, and our lives are shaped by it. We shape it. It's just a whole bunch of meaning gets drilled around just from the use of Adam, those three consonants, that a native speaker of Hebrew or Arabic or North Semitic, South Semitic languages would just understand.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so the way I look at things is also that I think there's a very clear connection in what the biblical texts are doing with the earlier mythologies and like the Enuma Elish and the other ancient Babylonian Sumerian pictures of how humankind is made, how earthlings are made, is related to this thing of what is the earth. And basically in the Sumerian and the Akkadian worldview, the earth was a goddess or a god that was thrown down, right? So Tiamat was, and this is the basic line of the Enuma Elish, is that the goddess Tiamat was thrown down and became the earth. And so when something's created from the earth, it does have an element of the divine.
Right. And in a similar way, you're looking at Indo-European myths, the universe is a creation of time, right? Kronos was one of the first titans. So, so the gods and eventually humans come out of time.
Yep. Yeah, you have the initial is what, Gaia and Uranus, the heavens and the earth. Then from that comes Chronos, time, and then it's a. But again, this is, for me, it's a very easy thing to understand and interpret when we think people imagining why everything is like it is, and they're searching what is the origin of everything. That makes so much more sense than trying to say who's right, which one is the true meaning. Or we're looking for answers, and we imagine.
Just to clarify, I'm always right.
Of course.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, it's no gods required, no aliens required. Right. Well, all that's required is the human imagination and our common experience as Homo sapiens. That's all that's required. And to me, in a spiritual sense, the siblinghood of mankind and our responsibility for our world that we call home, that gave rise to us and gave rise to everything on it. That's far more important than trying to figure out an excuse for our being here.
Yeah. Well, and
because that's a better use of our imagination than coming up with an excuse.
Recently watched an Anton Petrov video. If anyone has seen Anton Petrov, he specifies on what's happening in astrophysics and cosmology and stuff at the minute. And we have found links with the water on Earth, with water that has been illuminated through a supernova inside, I think, the Pleiades star system. Like, so even the water, even who we are, like, it doesn't go so far as saying our atoms are stardust. The literal water on our planet comes from around us. You know, that to me gives me more meaning with the universe around me, not to be all spiritual and shit, but that means more than, you know, who the fuck's this guy who won't let me eat an apple off a tree?
Yeah, it's enough. I mean, I think that science is a product of the human imagination. So are all the stories, but they're all products of the human imagination. Yet there's no need for a specific deity to answer the questions of why we're here. And some questions are just simply unanswerable. I mean, maybe it's dumb luck. Who knows?
I have questions. Matt,
Yep.
on your website, you have the slogan or the motto, the Bible was written backwards.
Yes.
And I haven't had the time to look into your content much except for that little trailer. The way I understand what you're saying there is the Bible, especially the foundational stories like Genesis, they go back to older stories, and those go back to older stories, and those. So,
Yes.
what's your end vision? Are you trying to find the quintessential Indo or Proto-Indo-European base myth,
Nope.
or you- or you're
Uh,
just or you're just working with what you got?
so I'm working with what I've got, and I'm actually going the other way. So my goal is to show how pretty much everything in the Bible is looking backwards. And even the things that people would say are looking forwards are looking backwards. And this is kind of my maybe my reaction to a fundamentalist Christian reading of the Bible or something, but also it's a way of just taking seriously that what we have is much better explained by asking what sources, what inspiration, what continuity do we have, rather than saying what's the ingenious, wholly inspired thing that we have. And so what I want to do is just work my way through the different texts and show, I mean, we look at Genesis, it's obvious, you know, we have the Babylonian stuff, but then also in Exodus, we get the same thing. We look at the law, we get the same thing. We look at the way the histories in the Old Testament are put together. It's also looking backwards. And then we go through the New Testament and it's the same thing. And that's kind of where it gets more, I guess, polemic or whatever you want to call it, is that when we move into the New Testament stuff, it's about the fact that prophecies aren't fulfilled just because you write about a text you already knew about and say that you know a guy who fulfilled it. But that these are that the way the Christian I guess apologist has presented the New Testament is that it's this miraculous fulfillment of prophecy, as though the authors didn't have the text in front of them that they say is being fulfilled. And so then again, it's the New Testament looking backwards. And then look at things like Jubilees, which is again rewriting the Bible, and other, you know, early Christian texts and early Jewish texts that are rewriting things, and just keep on looking backwards and saying, no, what does this mean now? No, what does this mean now? And so it's kind of, we can work our way all the way up to today, where we are rewriting the Bible constantly, or whoever's involved, engaged, interested is making their own take on the Bible. And so a modern reading or whatever that would say, oh, Jesus is love, God is love, everything's just about love, it's only love, 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 love. They're also rewriting the Bible into what their current context says.
Or if you want to go more concrete, just take the birth narrative, for example.
Yes, and that'll be
the way it's told on Christmas in thousands, hundreds of thousands of churches around the world is not the way it's written anywhere.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I have, I have all these materials from years of teaching and different things I've done. And one of them I do is one of the videos I'll get to when I get to it is doing on nativity scenes, right? Because nativity scenes.
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
So the nativity scenes are a construct of all the different birth narratives plus some other stuff, and they show up in Christian history, but they aren't in the Bible. And we know exactly where they come from and why they're there, why we have them, but they're a product of the imagination trying to make sense of the multiple narratives that are in the Bible.
You mean to tell me that the Kakoner's not real?
Sorry.
You know, the Kakoner, the little guy, the figurine in I think it's the southeastern Spain, Catalan.
Oh, the little shit
Catalan
figures.
precious.
Yeah,
The little guy is taking a dump in the corner.
Yeah, that's right.
Before we diverge too far away,
Yeah.
you know, talking about the nativity scene and stuff like that. Hashtag Team Richard. Could you give me what your general idea and maybe a paragraph of two? Are you a mythicist? You said atheist. You know, we're not going to go down that route, but you know, did a Jesus exist? Did 20 Jesuses existed? You know.
So you're asking me if I'm a mythicist? No, definitely I'm a historicist. If to use that lingo, I have no problem defending the existence of a person who was some kind of Jesus of Nazareth or something. And I don't think we know very much about what he actually did, but I think there's just too much evidence that there was a person.
Would
I
I
think there
be
were other
wrong?
people named Jesus in history, so I don't think we need like to dwell on that. But I don't buy the mythicist arguments in any way.
Would I be wrong in saying? Sorry, would I be correct in saying that a place referred to as Nazareth has been found archaeologically? You know?
Oh yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So there, and Jesus being a very popular name at the time, there's a definite possibility that a person came from there.
Sure.
That was called Jesus. You know, regardless of it.
I mean, yeah, and I think I think there's too much riding on just a mythicist claim that, but it wasn't that guy.
Oh, I
mean,
wouldn't be a mythicist.
What it really is. So from the mythicist perspective, you can that's the only argument you have is just saying, but it wasn't that guy. So
I would be.
We don't know which of them or which, and it's just like
the big question I want to ask you, hashtag Team Richard, is would you be of one of two teams? Would you be of one team where there was one guy who got emphasized very much so, definitely a person physical from Nazareth called Jesus, or would you be more of the multiple Jesus sort of idea where there's different guys who were very goddamn close? One walked in water, one fed fish, you know, and they all got accumulated into John.
So I don't think he walked on water or fed fish or whatever you
said. Yeah, but you know what I mean.
So what I think is I do
think
an
aquarium, that's for sure. That's biblical.
He maybe paid the tab once at the restaurant. That was it.
I literally listened to a full video today in the Book of Moses.
So I'll say I am not an expert in this field. This is way off the beaten path. And I'll just give you my feelings.
This is after party and all opinion, Team Richard.
Yeah. And to be honest, this is after party, and I'm going to be going to bed very soon. But what I will say that I think that there probably was a person that died that fit that description of the Jesus of Nazareth or whatever, because I think that the way Christianity starts is because people think they've seen this guy alive after his death. And that's the for me, it's really hard to separate from the fact that the church functions, that it works, that it grows, because somebody is really convinced that they've seen a guy that should be dead and they've seen him alive. And that is really hard to find a way around if there are 20 guys, or if this is just legends that come out. Like I really think that this was a really tangible and interesting discussion in the first century Jerusalem. Did you guys really see him alive? Yes, we did. And so I mean, that's my kind of feeling right now.
Well, L. Ron Hubbard, Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard headed off to Target 2, but he's coming back, according to them. It's the same. If it, I don't think it will take off the way Christianity did, and it's not, but it's a similar sort of thing.
Either we kind of think that that's the one guy, and he's convinced some people he's going to come back. But,
can I make a suggestion?
We actually know the guy did write a bunch of books.
Yeah,
and whatnot.
he did. He did. Yeah,
they're all garbage.
Right. Well, here's a suggestion. Right, you have a guy who has a very big following. You would consider that there's certain people who would do absolutely anything for their leader. They have a guy who looks very similar to them, and what they need to do is to confirm that he is Jesus. And how do you confirm? They convince another guy who's Judas to go, look, if I kiss this guy, he's definitely Jesus. And
that's fan fiction.
Right?
You're reaching.
And then he jumps back in again from the grave, because he never died.
Sure. I mean, you can write that story, but that's just a story. I
think it's already clear in the New Testament.
Trying to make a joke,
that they literally don't recognize him. Like, this is the thing that like in the New Testament, that it says like this guy comes walking up beside these two disciples on the way to Emmaus, and they
when he
don't
breaks the bread.
They do not recognize Jesus. And so it's like, and then he's like, dude, I'm Jesus. And they're like, what? And it's just like, you can't get around the fact that people aren't convinced that it's him. Thomas, the story of doubting Thomas as well. He's like, nope, that's not you. Nope. And he's like, oh, I got to touch your bloody holes, and that'll make me convinced. But like, this is not something where like they see him and they're like, what are you doing here? But they're like, they see somebody and then they get told, hi, I'm Jesus. And they're like, wait, what? Oh my gosh, you're living. You must be God. And so it's a very strange thing.
Meanwhile, Paul, very, very successful, the successful initial missionary to the Greek world, is going, well, I saw him. He appeared to me.
He appeared to him, but he was blinded by it, so he didn't actually see it. Right. So he doesn't. Yeah. He's like he was there, and I couldn't see, and I was dumbfounded, and they had to carry me to Antioch or whatever. But we're good to go. It's a bit of a weird stuff. But anyway, guys, I was
just about to jump in and cut you off, Team Richard, and let you make a point. Share your channel. Any of the mods that's still there, please post Team Richard's links in the chat. Share them out. Bible Monger. Bible's written backwards.
So thank you. I enjoyed this immensely, and now I'm going to go sleep. So
we're in the same time zone.
So we are. You need to go to bed too.
No, Matt Dillahunty's meeting up with Bart Ehrman in I don't know, half an hour or so.
Oh, I'm gonna
catch that.
I'm gonna watch that on tape, as we say.
And I'm gonna go mod the chat.
And I'm gonna troll you.
That would be fun.
Nice.
Oh, good.
Well, you all
You're out.
Well, I just want to again.
And just don't say anything nasty, okay? That's
if I can just say before Dr. Matt runs away, I want to thank him very much for coming in. It has been a very interesting chat. I really do appreciate you coming on, and you're welcome back anytime, man. Your expertise, your skills, your wrinkly brain, bring it back.
Thanks. I really enjoyed it.
This was fun.
It was great. Thank you so much. Really.
All right. Well, you'll have a good evening or night or morning or wherever you are.
Bye.
Bye. See you.
Stephanie, have you anything you would like to talk about or whatever?
I don't know. No, I'm trying to take a little bit of a break, but I don't have anything of great import coming up except for working on these bloody sales. Get them out the door.
Andy, anything coming up except helping me fix my
Um,
Discord, and I don't know why my computer.
yeah, I gotta fix your Discord. Everybody, do your backups. Avoid Windows 11. I mean, this is my area of expertise, actually.
It is his area.
Oh, by the way, Stephanie, I moderate Matt's Twitch chat, by the way. So
No, you do. Cool.
yeah, so I know what a good mod is. Not me. I just do it for the power rush. All right, guys.
Oh yeah.
Anything else, Andy?
Is everywhere.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Love yous all. Thank you. Oh, he just left. I don't even get. Stephanie, think for yourself. People in the audience, think for yourselves. Thanks everybody very much for coming. I shall talk to you all later. Bye.
Bye bye.